Shift Happens Podcast.
Welcome to the Shift Happens Podcast, where we explore the latest trends and technologies transforming the future of work. In this episode, we have the pleasure of speaking with Nick Usborne, an online copywriter with over 4 decades of industry experience, including clients like Citibank, Apple, the New York Times, and many others. In his latest venture, Future-Proof Copywriting, Nick combines the power of AI with emotional intelligence. We'll discuss today how to use AI tools to enhance your copywriting skills and avoid sounding like everyone else. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into the world of AI and copywriting. All right, well, welcome to Shift Happens, and thank you for joining us today. And before we get started, one of the first things I always ask our guests, so our listeners would definitely enjoy this, is as we navigate through this disruption of technological change and evolution, we've discovered that music has just this amazing way of capturing the essence of these changes and growth and evolution. So speaking of music, what songs resonate with you when you think about this change and evolution we're going through specific to technology?
It's kind of weird, and I'm not sure it's exactly what you're looking for, but when I was thinking about this, the song that came to my mind, the track that came to my mind was Money from Dark Side of the Moon, Pink Floyd.
Pink Floyd.
And I'll tell you why. It's a very short little story if we got time for that. I was in my late teens. I was probably about 18, and I was hitchhiking through France with a very close friend. And we were very late getting into this very small town looking for somewhere to sleep. And it was like the whole town was like really, really medieval, cobble streets, really, really old. Everyone had gone to bed. And then like, I don't know, 200 meters ahead of us, like there was one light on in a window. And suddenly out of that window started playing Dark Side of the Moon and this track, Money. And it was like so amazingly out of place, like in this medieval setting. And the hi-fi system must have been amazing. And we just stopped dead, just listening to this. And it wasn't the first time I'd heard Money, but it resonated. The surroundings were so amazing. This old town and this new song at that time, it was very new track. And it was a very kind of rebellious track. It was like looking at the rich and the poor and money. And that kind of resonated with me because I was going through a kind of rebellious stage myself at age 18. And so it really stuck with me, that. And then when I think about it now, it's as true to that song is as relevant today as it was like 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
When it came out, there's still this conversation about the rich and the poor, the division between the haves and the haves not. So it's like, I guess, a different look at transformation is sometimes transformation just kind of repeats in some ways. The new goes old and becomes new again.
That's right. Well, boy, I love that story because you're right. If you think about Dark Side of the Moon, when did the album come out? 1972, 73?
75.
In this song specifically, it juxtaposes, right? On one hand, money, you're thinking about wealth. But then if you really look at the lyrics and listen to the song, it criticizes the materialistic culture and this relentless pursuit of wealth.
Kind of transformation, but not really. It's just a different look at it.
Exactly, right? It's just, we're just in different phase, but the same challenges society that we had, we're still having. In fact, some may argue we may have bigger problems today. And this rapid change we're dealing with, right? So on one hand, you're talking about technology where, for example, AI, which we'll dive into, it's automating a lot of things. Now they're talking about, are we losing jobs? And then this instant gratification and consumerism and materialism as a result of these technological change, right? So I think the song is spot on. It's as relevant as how it was 30, 40 years ago to what we're dealing with today.
I love it. I love Pink Floyd. So
yeah, Pink Floyd's awesome. So, all right, so let's start with that as a anchor. So this was when you were 18, rebellious, traveling through France, and walk me through your journey and your career as a copywriter. And you're one of the pioneers in digital copywriting. How have you seen when you started, and how has the craft evolved in significant changes in milestones you witnessed?
After my rebellious phase, I hadn't any qualifications other than high school, and I wanted a job. And I asked around a few people, like, hey, tell me about a cool job where I didn't need any qualifications. And somebody said, well, go and work in the creative department of an ad agency. I got into the craft of copywriting. And then one of the big differences between then and now is back then, in, let's say, the early 80s, throughout the 80s in London, and it was similar in New York, creative was king. Copywriters were the founders of agencies. Copywriters had their name in the agency name. You know, the copywriter, creative director, that was it. That's all. I didn't want to be an account executive. I didn't want to be on media or production. I just wanted to be in the creative department because that was the coolest place to be. And that's where the highest salaries were. And when you look at some of the creative output from those years, these iconic, advertising campaigns that were created, it was just the glory days of creativity in advertising. Moved through the years, it became more data-driven. So now it is much more driven by marketing automation, data, and you'll find ad agencies where they don't even have copywriters and creative directors. It's kind of outsourced. Or otherwise, we'll get into some social media platforms like Facebook and Google, where they don't really need any creative output to create ads. You just give them the elements and they put it together. So I'm always leaning into technology. I love AI. I'm fascinated by it. I'm all in, but I truly miss the days where creative was king and where it was a real craft. We would spend so long on getting those pieces right. We would spend 2 weeks on one ad. And it was physical. There was a physicality to it because you actually had boards with PMTs on them that you would put on the courier to the printer. There was you could touch and feel it, right? It wasn't all on a screen. So very, very different times. And then from that point in my journey, I guess when I got really, really excited again was the mid-90s. I built my first website in 1995. And I just found that fascinating. And that whole period of 95 to 2000, 2001, I was just all in on the web. And again, it was so amazing. It was kind of, in those early days, it was like the democratization of media. Anybody could create a website. Not many people did in the early days, but anyway, you didn't need permission from a gatekeeper. I didn't need an editor to get or publisher to give me. I could just create a website, which I did. I created a few websites in the 90s, and it was that beautiful sense that, wow, this is for everyone. And then you kind of lean in now into the mid-2000s, where all of a sudden everything is dominated by sort of 5 big companies. And it's no longer that space where the little person can have a real voice because there's just this big noise in companies. So everything is changing. Huge change over that period. I mean, the craft, the basics of copywriting, of writing to sell, have remained remarkably the same. It's just the context and the technology has changed dramatically. And now, of course, with AI, that is another area where all of a sudden, as any kind of creative, you got to step in and say, hang on, if I don't want this to bury me, how do I ride this thing? It's like a big bull. You either get trampled or you ride it. And my view is like, hey, ride it.
So Nick, maybe let's unpack your initial journey, right? So you dropped in a couple of good golden nuggets. So first and foremost, for our listeners that may have heard about copywriting but not quite sure what it is, can you simply define what a job of a copywriter is when you got started, or maybe it's still the same today? When you say they write to sell, what does that look like? Is it writing ad campaign, or is it writing your words? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it could be writing the words on the billboard or the script for a TV commercial or radio commercial. It could be writing the words on an ad. It could be when you get that piece of irritating direct mail that was written by a copywriter.
Right.
So yeah, ultimately it's writing either to support and build a brand, like a lot of billboards. They're not really trying to sell you something today. You know, in the old days, the Marlboro Man cigarette billboard is just saying, hey, Marlboro's cool. Next time you have a cigarette, try Marlboro. So that was kind of background brand advertising. And then you get through to the more kind of direct response copywriting, which was a piece of direct mail, or the 1-800 number on late night TV, saying, do something now, buy something now. And that's still around, but in a digital form is click this buy button, click this subscribe button. So those pages and those buttons are written by copywriters. So it's the craft of using words to sell.
Or the things you would see, like what they call clickbait, right? You can't believe how I got promoted in 2 days. Click here. Right?
So I look at it and I think, no, I don't think I do believe you.
That's right. And you talk about you miss those golden days. You know, when you're describing it, it reminds me of like Mad Men, or maybe
it was the tail end of the Mad Men era. Yeah.
Right. Or the campaign that still lives today, right? Like the ultimate driving machine. That whole BMW campaign, that started in the late 70s, and it still rings true today, right? It's timeless.
There were some remarkable campaigns created in that period. This all weaves into AI. Like when you use AI, can it be something that helps you be more creative, or does it prevent you from being more creative? So that's a whole different part of the conversation.
Well, so let's talk about that. So in your line of work, right, what can copywriters do today to leverage AI tools? Obviously, there's a fear that, AI will take my job as writer, but personally, I don't think so. AI is just another tool, just like any other tools we had through the years. So in your world, how can copywriters leverage AI to, for example, enhance their workflow or spur ideas or increase productivity without compromising the human element?
So two things there. Actually, I want to push back on you a little, if I may.
Sure.
I think AI is already taking the jobs of some writers.
Okay.
So there are content writers who are writing blog posts, social media updates and posts and things like that. And there's a kind of, like with it in any profession, there's a kind of lower tier of people, and very often not in North America. They're working elsewhere in the world. They have lower cost of living. They charge less to write all of this content. And, you know, if you're going to say the quality of a copywriter, A, B, C, D, no disrespect to them, but they're kind of D. All right. And that's what they do. And that's what their clients want. Just want tons of content. Those jobs are either gone or going, because a tool like GPT-4 is just as good as that. It's just as good as a D level. It's probably as good as a C level. So we are seeing some job losses for content writers and copywriters. And as these tools become more sophisticated, maybe the tide will keep rising. And as human copywriters, we have to do something to stay above the tide, the high water mark, as it were. So what I say to people is, look, lean into this. If you ignore AI, if you say, oh, no threat there, it can never be as good as a human. One, that's not really entirely true, because it's as good as some humans. But also you leave yourself very, very vulnerable, if not today, then in the future. So I say to writers, look, learn it, use it, become better at using it than your clients and prospects and in-house teams. And a lot of that is understanding the prompt process. Mm-hmm. I hear a lot of writers say to me, oh, I tried ChatGPT and it was terrible. The output was awful. It was really bad. And then I say, well, how much time have you spent like on prompting and stuff? They say, oh, well, I just typed something in. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, hey, we'll go. Let's get back to Pink Floyd and David Gilmour. Incredible, beautiful guitarist. If I pick up a guitar, it's just an awful noise because I don't know how to play the instrument.
Yeah.
Right? Dave Gilmour, he picks up a guitar, it's beautiful. And in a sense, it's not an ideal analogy, but it can be a little bit true with kind of prompting and prompt engineering. Is if you just pick it up and try it, and it's a terrible noise and terrible prompt with terrible output, sure. But if you learn it, if you really spend the hours, if you spend 100 hours learning how to prompt, you get a very, very different quality of output.
So can you give an example of a good prompt versus a bad prompt?
If I'm doing a lazy prompt, it's write me a 500-word blog post on the health benefits of jogging.
Sure.
And that's it. And it'll come up with something. It'll be, okay. If I now go back to it and I say, okay, because you can put a lot more into that prompt box than just that. I'm going to say, okay, I want you to write in the voice of a fitness expert. And I could write 5, 10, 20 lines describing the expertise of that fitness expert. I say, you're going to be writing to And now I'm going to kind of basically create an avatar of the ideal reader of that piece. Here's this, it's probably male, female equally, probably aged between 20 and 30, probably more suburban than in a city. So I'm doing this full avatar of who you're writing to. Then I'm going to say, okay, here are 4 examples of really successful pieces of content we created before on similar topics. So I'm going to paste in those 4 blog posts. Then I'm going to give it some instructions on, all right, I want this to be in, between 500 and 700 words. I want at least 4 or 5 subheads. So I'm giving the tool a whole lot more information and context. And I said the context, like, this is the voice to write in. This is the avatar, the audience you're writing to.
The persona.
Examples that work really well. And here's just some basic kind of structure. Like, I want it in this number of words. I want a heading. I want you to do the metadata for me, and I want at least 4 subheads. And then now I'm ready to submit. So that's not lazy prompting. That's more considered prompting. And then I'll look at the output. It's almost certainly going to be way better. And if it is, I'm going to say, hey, that's cool. And I'm going to save all of that original input as a preset. I'm going to save it as a preset so that I don't have to go through that process again. Write the next bit of content for this same client or project. So it's just like some people get great output from these tools because they put, a lot of effort into it. It's the lazy prompters they're thinking, okay, I'm going to show how this is rubbish. So they put in a lazy prompt. The output is really not good. They say, I told you, it's rubbish.
That's right. and
playing the guitar.
Exactly. And then they put the guitar aside and then carry on with their old habits, right? So speaking of that, so that's a really good example, and it's really good guidance for a lot of our listeners. Even if you're not copywriting, this is definitely helpful for you. So how does the human element comes in then? How do you marry the human part, and you talk about emotional intelligence in the context of digital copywriting?
All right. So this is where I start talking about, hey, anyone who's been a copywriter for any length of time understands that emotion is the most powerful thing in selling. We buy stuff because we like it. We think that we are very rational about our purchase decisions. We're not. It's almost always like the little amygdala at the back. It's like the cave person response. I want that. I want that. I want a Porsche 911. I want whatever it is. So we buy it because we want stuff. So emotion has always been at the center of engaging with prospects and converting prospects into buyers. We always want to touch people emotionally. AI is not very good at that. AI can read about it. It's read Romeo and Juliet. It's read the script to Love Story. It understands what emotions are, but it has never felt emotions and never can feel emotions. It can never eat ice cream. It can never walk along the beach and feel the sand between its toes, or the smell of salt in the air, or the sound of gulls in the sky. It kind of had these first-hand experiences. It can just read about it. So AI can do emotion in a fairly kind of blunt way, but it really cannot do the nuance of emotion. And that's a very, very powerful thing. So that's why I say to people, look, use AI. It's an amazing productivity tool. It's an amazing brainstorming tool. It can help you come up with great ideas as a kind of brainstorming partner because it's just so incredibly knowledgeable. But when it comes to the writing, don't do just AI. Otherwise, hey, I was looking at a web page this morning for it's a new platform for helping teams of copywriters together. And it says, okay, here's the prompt library. Here's the template library. And they're using AI. So I think to myself, well, hang on. So all of these people are using the same AI tool, say GPT-4 or Gemini, Claude 3, whichever is their favorite. They're using the same tool. They're using the same prompt library, and they're using the same template. So templates for, here's a template for a white paper, for a brochure, for
a blog,
tweet, whatever. So they're all using these same things, and then they're surprised when the output is the same. It's undifferentiated. It's the same because they're using the same tools and the same prompts and the same templates. And as a company, whatever the size, whether you're a solopreneur or you're a vast brand, the last thing you want is for your brand to sound the same as everyone else's. Hey, big companies, you're talking about BMW and its tagline.
Yeah.
It was BMW, didn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So They've over the years have literally spent billions on differentiating the BMW brand. If they start using AI without being careful, they're going to sound the same as Hyundai. And it's a whole different conversation. Most cars now look like a Hyundai. Whatever the brand, everyone's just creating SUVs that look the same, which is odd. Mm-hmm. But in the world of advertising and marketing and copywriting, you do not want to sound like everyone else. Yeah. But AI can lead you down that path, which can be a problem. If you put a bit of messy human in the middle, now you can differentiate. If you tell some stories, if you touch on real emotion, nuanced emotion, now all of a sudden, yes, you're using the AI tools, but you're integrating artificial intelligence and emotional intelligence. All right, the computer and the emotions. So now you get the benefits of AI, but you actually get more powerful copying content by making it more emotion because people respond to emotion. And you're now giving yourself the opportunity to differentiate your work from the work of others.
Sure. No, this is awesome. What you described there reminds me of like stock photos, right? So people today use a lot of the same stock photos in their presentation on their website. Like, wait a minute, maybe we should take our own photos so it'll be more original.
And you can recognize a stock photo, right? It's like, oh, right. It's a stock photo. You may not even have seen it, but the stock photo generally has a certain vibe to it. And it's because it's, in a sense, it's too good. And it's the same sometimes with AI output. You want a little bit of messy human in there to make it, to engage. Say, hey, that's like me. I'm a messy human too.
So a lot of our listeners are in the tech industry. And a lot of us not only are involved in tech industry, we work in tech. So how do you include that messy human, the storytelling aspect, the emotions into some of the work we do? So for example, we talk about tech all day long. We may be presenting about tech. So how do you kind of infuse that in without making it overly seem like it's not as credible? Because now you're talking a lot about the messy human is part of it.
I guess, in part, we can take something from the tech world, like in the development of these models. There's the concept of the human in the loop, right? So in the training of the models, the training of the parameters, the kind of guardrails, you have humans. These models have had hundreds of thousands of humans just checking that the output is not overtly racist or overtly hallucinating or overtly. So there's always been like a human in the loop in the development of these models. I'm just saying, hey, bring that forward into the creation of whatever you create with these tools, is make sure there is still a human in the loop there, so that the human can look at it and say, you know what, that looks like the text equivalent of a stock photo.
That's right. All right. That's right.
It may be well written, and sometimes the output. Sometimes I put in my messy writing and I say, you know what, I'm just not getting this right. There's a transition here that I'm messing up, and I'll paste it into something like GPT-4, and I'll say, hey, fix this. And sometimes the output's great, sometimes not, but it's a tool I can use. So it's really good at writing well. Its grammar is near perfect. Its spelling is near perfect. But you want that human in the loop to say, well, hang on, this sounds a little too clinical, a little too stock photo-ish. Insert. And the kind of stories that are very, very human are the kind of stories that the AI can't really understand. I'll give you another example, another story from my life. I was taking my kids to like a theme park in the Toronto area in Canada. And we got out of the car, walking across the parking lot, and suddenly I was like blinded. There was this like kind of weird explosion in my face. And I was completely freaking out. I couldn't see. I didn't know what hit me. My kids were laughing. And I was freaking out, and my kids were laughing, and I was so confused. What it turned out is a seagull had pooped on me, but it didn't hit me on the head. It went in between my glasses and my eyeball. So I had this explosion of poop across my eyes, and I couldn't see. And my kids thought it was hilarious. And that has become like a stock family story, right? Hey, do you remember the time when Dad got poop on his glasses? AI can't understand that. All right. Yeah. So there's always these levels of experience and sensory. How can an AI understand what it feels like when you have the impact of bird poop on your eyelid. I mean, in that way, it can't get that. But as humans, we can. Even if we haven't experienced it, we can kind of imagine it. So, I mean, that's an extreme story. But what I want to do is kind of separate the AI experience from the human experience.
That's right.
And it's looking for opportunities to bring that in. And you can do that as well with your prompting. So I might prompt something. I might prompt one of these models to create some output. It could be an email. It could be a page, a sales page. It could be whatever. And I'll look at it and I'll say, you're kind of leading here. This is a bit descriptive. Can you lead with benefits rather than just kind of description? And it'll rewrite it and it'll do that pretty well. It understands the structure of sales copy. If I ask you to write an email, there'll be a beginning, a middle, and an end, a call to action. It understands the basic structure of sales. But I might say, okay, let's lead with benefits. Can you put in a little story or anecdote at the beginning? And it will. So now I'm playing the human emotional game, the story game, but I'm still using the tool. And I did this recently, and it was something to do with a sign up for a conference. And I went through this process, and I said, okay, make it a bit more, start with a little story, and it did. And I thought, that reminds me of something that happened to me at a conference. And then I went in and I replaced its story with my story, which was and again, here we're looking at the difference between, thank you very much, the stock photo and the regular photo. Like the GPT-4's story was a stock photo. My story was the real thing.
That's right.
I'm using the tools to kind of get me towards a more human output.
That's right.
But I'm still ready to jump in and say, you know what, I know how I can change that. I can make that better.
That's perfect, because that's where the tool can become a great enabler and also help you, in this case, with ideation, right? So you say, write a story, and then the story came up, and then a memory popped up. Then you can backfill it with your own experience. I think about in my world. So for example, we have technologies that help manage and move data from on-premises or different cloud providers. So for example, I can write a piece on, have AI write a piece on how to migrate from, I don't know, Google Workspace to Microsoft 365. But then the human element can come in and say, when I did this, this is what worked, this is what didn't work. And then, we can have AI help clean that up, fix the grammar. But then there's the experiential part now where people can learn from me versus an academic step-by-step approach that AI came up with.
So this is so now you're collaborating with the tool, right? And I think a lot of people come to these tools, it's like using a piece of software. I press this button, you do what you do. And that's a one-way relationship with software. This isn't. You can actually have a two-way relationship with these models, and you can collaborate in the way you've described. So I had an example of this. I can't remember the topic, but I was asking GPT-4, which is still my favorite. I know others are getting there. I asked it to put together something in 5 steps, which is kind of a marketing person kind of thing to do, like the 5 steps to war. The output was okay. And then I paused and I said, okay. And I went back and I said, hey, how would you have done this? Can you think of a better way to express this than my 5 steps approach? And it did. And it came back with output that was actually better than what I originally suggested. So now I'm not just using it as a software tool, like press enter and something happens. I'm not treating it with respect because it is a piece of software, but I'm collaborating with it because it is capable of doing that. And I think some people don't because they feel uncomfortable with being in conversation. And that has been one of the miracles. Like the thing that blew our minds when ChatGPT first came out, November 22.
Yeah,
was the fact that it was conversational.
That was
because I'd worked with AI before with chatbots, and it was really, really technical and difficult. And then suddenly it was just conversational, and that was mind blowing.
And this is the biggest shift in the capability, right? As you mentioned, in the past, software is there's input, there's output, and you do it 10 times, it's always the same, right? 1 + 1 is always equals 2. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the difference with this is now you can have a conversation. Depending on what you say, the output may be different, and that's okay. And I think this is a new muscle for all of us to really build upon, the same way with prompting, but it's this idea and getting past the hump of it's not your granddad's copywriting tool anymore. It's not your typewriter anymore, right? So this can help you, you can collaborate with it, as you mentioned.
Right. I mean, I'm in contact with a lot of copywriters and content writers and creatives in the web space. And, I get a fair amount of pushback because, and I get it, because they're saying, hey, this is stealing our jobs. And like I say, in some cases it is, and there'll be more to come. And it's weird because I'm fascinated and excited by it. But I also, going back to the very early day, I was talking about the 1980s. I miss that. I miss that kind of craftsmanship, the 100% human. Like, if you remember the first half of the 80s, we didn't even have computers. I guess it was 85, 86 before I got my Mac. So before that, it was a typewriter. It was a hands-on craft. And like I say, creative was king. And now it is so technological, and I miss it. And in parts of me, nostalgic and think, you know what, I wish this had never happened. I wish AI had never happened, so I could actually still be, the creator
right
on my own. So a lot of copywriters feel that way and push back and say, hey, we should be, going on strike or whatever. And we've seen some of that, like in Hollywood, striking to draw some lines as to what these tools shouldn't be allowed to do. So yeah, I can't find myself in this weird space. I mean, I'm fascinated by it and I enjoy it and I learn about it and I teach it. But I'm still slightly nostalgic for the good old days.
But do you think, though, so let's talk about the opposite end of the spectrum. Do you think as a result of these capabilities and tools, the rigor will slowly disappear, the discipline and people's desire and motivation to really be good at the craft? Because I can always say, well, I don't really need to learn a lot about this because AI can help me. Do you think that'll happen?
Yeah, I think it's entirely possible. I think the automation of things, it's like, I was trying to think who it was. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and he was talking about how because a lot of writers, we think by writing. And there's that, and often with a first draft or headlines or something, or ideas, I'll use a pen and paper. So I've still got that kind of physicality there. And it's a bit like when we first got the pocket calculator, we no longer had to learn how to do mental arithmetic. All right. As a kid, like I took a lot of my exams without the benefit of calculators. We used sliding rules. But we had to learn mental arithmetic because there wasn't the bit. As soon as you have a calculator, you don't have to do that anymore. And now that I have a writing tool that I can give a prompt to, and students, business people, everyone's doing this, all of a sudden it's not, I don't have to write it, but I don't have to do the thinking that goes into writing. I don't have to think it through. I don't have to think of, hey, what's the best way to open this? Or what's the best story to tell to engage someone? It's so I think over time, there may be, it may be a generation of writers who just use these tools and into your words, they lose that muscle, that muscle of thinking themselves, of creating themselves, because they don't need to anymore. And I think some of this will be taken out of people's hands. Like a big thing that happened in recent weeks is WPP, which is the world's largest ad agency group.
Ad agency,
it's a group. They own Ogilvy. They own a lot of the original iconic agencies.
Yep.
And they are doing a deal with Google to use Gemini across all their creative product, like whether it be images or text. So now we have these hundreds of agencies, I think it's about 100 agencies they have around the world. We'll all be using Gemini in the creative departments to help with creation. And so, yeah, you've got a lot of very talented people who all of a sudden are having to use that muscle less because they have this tool to do it for them.
Yeah.
And over time, more and more will be automated. And the output, what scares me is the output will be good enough. It won't be great. It'll be good enough And that'll be a terrible moment because, like, again, if I go back to the very early days, when I first started out, my first job, I worked with this amazing designer art director, Peter Smithman. And I learned so much from him. And when we created ad campaigns, we would, first of all, we'd make it good enough to meet the brief. We'd then work on it some more, another 20%, so that the client was blown away. We were delivering more than we promised. And then we put in another 20% of time making changes and tweaks to that only he and I would ever realize were there. We did it for ourselves, for love of the client. And yeah, we spent extra time and extra budget doing stuff that no one else would notice, like moving a period so it looked perfect. And that's already gone, but it's like it's part of a path. So that is my fear, is that the really creative work, and there's usually a lot of hard work that goes into creative work. A lot of that perhaps will die because there's a lot of automation going on. And what will happen is we used to have to create great ads to persuade people to take an action. Now what happens is so much data, like very soon now, an ad that you see won't be exactly the same as the ad I see, because it'll know
exactly,
and it'll change the copy on the fly. So to achieve the same results, it won't need to be great creative because it has the benefit of this extraordinary data.
That's right.
So it'll sell through data and not creative. So is that a good or a bad thing? I don't know, but I kind of miss that creative moment.
I mean, we see that a lot in the past few years, especially with the explosion of social media, right? Like, think about videos. Like, now it's good enough. Anybody can take a phone, dance on TikTok, and start selling tons of products, right? Is it good or bad? I don't know, but hey, it sells.
Yeah.
And now the game is also volume, right? We talk about content is king, but then the volume of content can help drive business too. That's why, like, we're in this day and age where you see a lot of these online influencers, you know, they're pumping out videos and reels and stories every hour. And just to push this idea of buy. And yeah, people click on it, they buy it. It's too easy.
Right. Everything now is transactional.
Yes.
It is. Again, if you go back, and I don't want to sound like some old geezer, old nostalgic, because I love the new technology as much as anyone. But, you know, there was a long game. This campaign or a series of campaigns will build our brand across the next 5 or 10 years. That's the long game. But now it's not like that. It's like you say, it's bang, 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 bang. You know, 100 more pieces of content today, please.
I think it's just the nature of the world we live in now, where everything's moving so fast, right? One day Tesla's king, another day Tesla's not king, right? So, but we live in that reality. So again, like you, is we have to lean into it regardless of our personal feelings, right? Where not only does it help obviously with our careers, but also in the future, I think it can help shape this new way of writing, new way of ideating, and new way of being creative, frankly.
Yeah, and I think that collaborative approach can be creative.
Yeah,
like these models have helped me recognize and see ideas that I wouldn't have had on my own. Or I'll see a phrase and say, "Hey, I hadn't thought of that. Expand on that."
Yeah.
Shift Happens Podcast. Shift Happens Podcast.
We can keep going and be creative and walk down memory lane here, but to wrap up, if you can share 1 or 2 key takeaways and learnings with our listeners as they think about copywriting or writing in general, to successfully navigate and thrive in this age of AI, with all these new technologies, how can they really maximize it? And what have you learned? If you can drop 2 golden nuggets, that would be fantastic.
I would say lean into it. It really is like a huge wave. You're either surfing it or you're being crushed by it. And again, right or wrong, I think we need to lean into it. And if you're of a curious mindset, you'll probably really enjoy the journey of leaning into AI. I don't think, you know, I still know lots of people, particularly on the creative side, who say, no, thank you. I want nothing to do with it. And that's okay. That's their choice. But I think it's going to be hard for them in the years to come. So one, I'd say lean into it. But then I'd say don't just use it as a tool. Use it to collaborate so that it improves your own thinking. Use it as a creative partner, as a brainstorming partner, but also bring a lot of emotion into it, because that's the one weakness. And if you ask these tools, what's your weakness? They'll tell you we don't get the nuance of emotion because we have no human experiences. We just read about it. And then this becomes the differentiating factor, because I was talking before about the sameness trap. If you're using the same prompts, the same tools, same prompts, same template library, you're going to sound the same as everyone else, which isn't good for anyone. So you need to differentiate, and you do that through the kind of nuanced emotion. So lean in, love the tool, add in emotion.
We're so excited that you joined us today. We're able to do this, and hopefully in the future, we'll have you back and start talking about the next wave of technology.
I would love that. And I hope I haven't rambled too much. I get excited by this stuff.
Shift Happens Podcast.
Thank you for listening. And a big thank you to Nick for sharing his insights and experience with AI and copywriting. We learned the importance of treating AI as a collaborator rather than simply an order taker. If you like today's episode, subscribe and leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. See you next time.